Could you not speak Spanish again? It's seriously annoying. Melanie didn't even look at me when she said it. She just tossed the milk jug into the sink, foam splattering onto the counter. Her tone was light, but the way she snapped the rag against the edge of the espresso machine made her irritation is obvious. I stood behind the counter, halfway through taking an order from a young couple. They were tourists, nervous about their English. So I'd switch Ed to Spanish without thinking. They smiled when they stood under, visibly relieved. But now, their smiles had faded. I'm just helping, I said quietly, keeping my eyes on the register. Helping, she scoffed, loud enough for the couple to hear. You mean, showing off? You think anyone's impressed? The cafe buzzed Ed with soft music and chatter, but her words hung in the air like static. It gave the couple their change, wished them a good day, and watched them leave. My hands felt steady, but my jaw was locked. Melanie turned to me with that familiar, half a smile sweet on the surface, but sharpened underneath. Seriously, not everyone wants to hear your accent. I didn't answer, just went back to steaming milk, letting the hiss of the machine drown her out. But the smell of burnt coffee mixed with something bitter, the start of something that wouldn't go away. I'd been at the cafe for 3 months. It wasn't much minimum wage, early mornings, and aching feet, but it paid the rent while I finished university. Melanie had been there for 2 years. She trained new hires, handled the regulars, and always managed to look busy when the manager walked by. Everyone likes her, or at least pretended to. Everyone except me. From the beginning, she decided I didn't belong. Maybe it was the way I spoke. Maybe it was my accent. Maybe it was the way Jason laughed at her quiet crush a little too easily when he made a joke. It started small. She'd forgot to restock the cups before my shift, swap my labels. If a customer complained about an order, she'd make sure the manager heard my name attached to it. And when I tried to fix things, she'd sigh loudly and say, "Don't worry, I'll handle it," like she was cleaning up my mess. At first, I told myself to ignore it, to be professional, to keep my head down. But the comments got meaner. She'd correct my pronunciation in front of customers even when I was right. Once when a French couple complimented me for speaking their language, she muttered, "Guess Google Translate finally came in handy." They laughed awkwardly. I didn't. The worst was the morning she accidentally spilled a drink on my notes before my midterm. She just shrugged. She smiled and said, "You should really be more careful." That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the smell of coffee still on my hands, wondering why it mattered so much. I'd dealing with language barriers before worse. Stereotypes. The way people assume you race slow just because you have an accent, but something about her felt personal, deliberate. And maybe it was. Things escalated when Jason started covering more shifts. He was friendly with everyone, but he had a way of making me laugh when I didn't want to. Melanie noticed. One afternoon, I caught her leaning against the counter, whispering to him. When I walked past, she dropped her voice just enough for me to catch. She only talks to you because she thinks it'll get her better shifts. Jason looked uncomfortable, muttered something, and walked away. She turned to me smiling again. Careful. Wouldn't want people to get the wrong ideas. That smile, it was the same every time. A signal. She was daring me to react. I didn't. Not then. But it noticed something new she'd started, watching me whenever I spoke another language. Her jaws would clench. Her knuckles would whiten around her rags. And one day, when I greeted Egerman families in their language, she muttered under her breath, "God, she's so desperate." The next morning, I found out she'd filed a complaint. The manager, Rebecca, called me into the office. She says you're making customers uncomfortable. Rebecca said carefully by switching languages too much. I stared at her, making them uncomfortable. They thanked me. Rebecca sighed. Ick no, I've seen it. But HR wants us to document everything. When I walked out, Melanie was waiting by the counter, pretending to refill napkins. Our eyes met and she smiled small, satisfied, victorious. That was the moment something clicked inside me. The next few days, I worked in silence. I didn't greet customers in other languages, didn't talk. Unless necessary, Melanie looked disappointed. She'd won. For now, but I'd stopped playing defense. Because while she gloated, I started observing. I noticed she often came in late but clocked in early, that she forgot to log refunds, that she'd let her friends use expired coupons, and pocket ed the difference. Small things, hidden under the noise of the rush. And it started keeping notes, screenshots, receipts, a quiet archive of her mistakes. She thought I was beaten, but I was building something steady, deliberate, quiet. And by the time she realized, it would already be too late. I handed the phone back to Rebecca before I said anything. Let her hear Melanie's practiced outrage in the background. Then I sat down, opened my notebook, and began to speak in a voice that would not rise. The plan was not dramatic. It was paperwork, timing, and small public humiliations arranged to expose an established pattern. Revenge in this cafe would be arithmetic. First, inventory. It started. Coming in early and staying late. Ostensive blight to clean. A learned where. The supplier pallets were stacked. Which invoices sat loose in the bottom drawer? And which camera covered the back door? I watched. The way Melanie signed her. Initials, a quick loop at the end. A habit that would become important. I photocopied receipts when no one watched. Notes timestamps 7/12/90307 1908 7/26/912. On several of those, adjustments had been logged, syrup counts reduced. Petty cash reconciliations that never matched the drawer. Second, people. Ethan came my ally because he was clumsy in a way that hid sincerity. I taught him to log everything on the inventory sheet and to take a phone photo of the cash count at closing. Jamie, who had been slack-jawed when he first saw Melanie, began to tell me about the late-night friends who sometimes borrowed Eden's sold pastries. Small admissions added up. Avender I bumped into at the delivery bay a courier named Louise who hated incompetence confirmed a pattern. Packages signed for by Melanie at odd hours, allegedly on the manager's behalf. Third, procedure. I didn't confront. I fed discreet facts to Rebecca and Daniels, arranging audits under the plausible guise of efficiency. It suggested a petty cash reconciliation during a slow afternoon and proposed a supplier's cross-check. They agreed because I was the quiet foreigner who'd beckon the reliable shifts when things tighten. On the day of the audit, the cafe smelled of lemon cleaner and damp cardboard. The owner's representative sat stiff, fly at the end of a long table. I handed over a stack of printouts, supplier invoices with matching delivery stamps, CCTV stills timestamped 8/12 and 08, 19 showing Melanie carrying a seal-lead envelope to her locker, advance photos of the counted cash at close, and my own annotated manifest with the loop ed. Initials circled, the pages made a small, cold mountains. She had expected surprises. She had Ray. Here's Ed anger for the meeting. Instead, we moved in clinical steps. Daniel read the receipts. Aloud, the supplier replica confirmed signature. Matches. Rebecca asked Melanie to explain why. Adjustments had been entered without manager. Approval. Melanie's voice hitched. She pivoted, tried to paint herself as a protector. I covered for Daniel when he was late, she said, but the delivery stamps and time logs did not corroborate. When the CCTV screenshots were projected on Rebecca's laptop, the room saw what the ledger could not hide. Melanie taking small envelopes from the till areas the night tips were counted. Melanie slipping items into her bag after the evening rush. Melanie signing for 2 separate suppliers. Adjustments on the same date with identical phrasing. The owner's SRP folded his arms and let the silence do its work. Melanie's defense narrowed into a single trembling strategy. Blame. She accused Ethan of planting evidence. Accused me of orchestrating an attack on her. Accused the vendor of lying. Her voice grew louder, more reckless. At one point she lunged at the logbook and ripped appage, as if destroying paper could erase photographs and timestamps. Her hands shook now once a calculated tool. The hands betrayed her by their tremors. Then she did something small and humans that revealed everything. She begged. It started like a hiss, then a quiver. Please, she said to Daniel, to the owner, to anyone who would listen. Ihavi bills. I need this job. The plea was raw, stripped of theatrical cruelty. It exposed the calculus underneath her performance. If you can manufacture authority, you can hold on. When authority collapses, the person remains. She was that person. Daniel did not make a speech. He set down the ledger, folded his hands, and made the pragmatic choice companies make in these cases: termination for violation of trust and financial irregularities. Melanie's face went through a sequence disbelief, fury, then fear so sharp it looked like a physical ache. She tried to bargain, to cry, to cast herself as the victim. Even then, when her voice trembled and she mouthed apologies, it felt like punctuation marks on a sentence already concluded. Outside the door, someone whispered that the cafe regulars had started to avoid the windows where she used to serve. With a loud fleur remark, a few days later, the local food blogger who had once called the staff charming wrote that the cafe had stumbled through management changes and recommended a different nearby spots. The jar of tips normalized again. Ethan, steadier for the storm, kept the ledger and learned to say no. The last time I saw Melanie, she stood under a thrifted awnings at a street market selling scarves with a face drained of practiced heat. She looked up when a customer paused and flinched at our eyes for a meeting. Second, he did not approach. The ledger and the receipts had done the work that words could not. When Rebecca asked me if I wanted to press charges, I declined. I wanted the truth documented, the financial breaches corrected, and the cafe to stop being a small arena where humiliation was weaponized. What I wanted most was to go to work without bracing for the next small cruelty. I wanted to keep doing the job well. Weeks later, management instituted clearer inventory controls, a logged photo at close, and an anonymous tip line. The cafe chum returned, orders steamed, neighbors argued over table space, and students studied with laptops open. I kept greeting tourists in their languages, but Eno no longer did it defensively. He did it because it mattered. Ethan ran the morning shift with a calmy Oddmerd. Jamie stocked shelves without pretense. Revenge had been less airishing than a slow settling. The way Akup cools after steam has done its work. When customers now praised the service, they meant the small consistencies, the right drink, the correct change. The courtesy, Melanie stumbling, had been brief and private. The public consequences of the termination, the whispered gossip, the loss of the small power she'd wielding Ed was proportionate and final.